Welcome back, everybody. We'll just go to on the first, the main agenda, page 220, 11.5 elected members expense and resource policy proposed leave of absence section. So this one, we're just going to put a resolution to let it lie on the table. We will workshop this again, just so we can get a little bit better feedback as to how we want to see this to work. So I'm happy to move to leave this on the table. Councillor Kurak, thank you. All those in favour? Those against? Thank you. That will be left on the table and we'll come back with a workshop on that. Now I think we go to the supplementary agenda. And page 20, yeah, of a supplementary agenda, page 22, 11.7, Tauranga Parking Management Plan implementation. I think we've got Sean, Reese and Nick to speak to the report. If you could just give us a brief overview, and then I'm sure there'll be a number of questions on this.
Yeah, kia ora. Yes, I had actually prepared a beautiful little introduction here where I was going to talk about tying the parking management plan to the strategy and the strategic objectives, etc. Reading the room and where we're at on the agenda, I think we just crack on with it. So with that introduction, I'll hand over to Sean, Mike and Reese. Thank you.
Yes, so good afternoon. I'm just wanting to very briefly note that the implementation of further parking management was put on hold March 24, so last year, and this included a pause to further paid parking in and around the city centre. Would also like to note that we do propose, and it's not in the report, that on parking fees we have a workshop to discuss the principles of price setting, and that way we can have a much more full conversation on how we set prices and why in particular, and that workshop can either occur before or after the annual plan.
Thank you. So my usual question on these types of issues is, what is the problem we're trying to solve?
So I'll be the one to jump on that hand grenade then, eh? No, it's parking, despite the fact that it's obviously a grudge purchase, you know, we can be honest about that. We know the deal when it comes to paid parking, but it's there to help us efficiently manage our existing roading resource. If we leave it uncontrolled, we've got competing demands in tight areas that are intensifying as we speak at the moment, and you increasingly see friction in terms of business, visitor, customer users. Everybody in these tight little spaces all wants free car parks all the time for their specific use case, and different people have different uses. So this is how we manage that. The parking management plan isn't just about pricing as well. So it also includes time limits, restrictions, any requirements over loading bays and the like. So I hope that answers your question.
So that's perfect. So I just obviously there is a report here and you know, gone through the report, but from the public's perspective at the moment, we've got a shortage of parking, you know, both residents, businesses and people working in the CBD are struggling with parking. Is that?
Not just the city centre, we've also seen it quite heavily in the Mount town centre with high occupancy rates there. In the industry, over 85% usage of your car parks is considered heavily used. And so in those two areas especially, which was the order that those plans came in, those were deemed problem areas with that sort of, you know, increased use and high density of usage.
Excellent, thank you. Rather.
I'm going to start by just maybe putting some words in your mouth. Are you specifically saying that the mayor had used, I think, that people are struggling with parking in the city centre. Like, my observation is there are various layers around that. So would it be fair to say that in certain zones around the city centre, there is massive competition for parking during the workdays, but in the city centre itself, that may or may not be the case at certain times?
So overall, yes, we have capacity in the city centre predominantly. However, not where people necessarily want that capacity. So if you went down Devonport Road, you would be very lucky to find a car park.
Yep. That wasn't my question though. And I've got a few, but I'll see how many I can get away with. So I guess I'm interested on the supplementary agenda. What is it? Appendix something or other. Appendix 4, with the financial side of it. And it sort of ties into a comment in the supplementary agenda itself, which says if we don't do the expansion, it will negatively impact the parking activity's contribution to financing arrangements, which, as part of the answer, you could tell me what financing arrangements means. But sort of the question I've got relates to that table. And I'm looking at, presumably on the appendix, on attachment 4 on page 136 out of the 335 page document. And so if we don't do the expansion, we see a different scenario to if we do one, so that's fine. But I'm looking at this, the way the debt figures go, and I'm looking at what is driving this huge increase in the parking activity debt. What are the budgeted Te Manuataki o Te Papa drawdowns that it refers to, and why, given that we need to compare like with like, I'm just thinking, even if we just do that one comparison, you see 2028 debt stays about the same, but you get to 2034 and the LTP number is 41 million, but now we're at either 50 or 56, depending on which scenario we're talking about. And I'm thinking, why does it suddenly rocket up after 2028? Is it something to do with that reference to Te Manuataki? Can you maybe unpack all that? Give us a narrative that explains all those questions if you can.
The three parking people are looking at me, so there is 46 million of drawdowns associated with Te Manuataki. I just don't have the timing of what that drawdown looks like, but that would be the increase in debt in that activity would be Te Manuataki debt drawdown. So
that, just to be clear on that, would past resolution in terms of that we don't use any funding for Te Manuataki where there is debt within that activity. But this implies there's, well, not implies, it states there's debt in that activity. So how can we draw down when we're going against council resolution that was quite explicit saying we don't want to do that?
So the resolution that was passed, I thought, was that to not use the results of any proceeds for asset sales until debt was paid down, but not specifically in this situation where it's, and it's similar with the airport as well in terms of the drawdown there, albeit that won't have a debt position.
It was interpreted more liberally than that by the management. So we'd have to pass another resolution to that effect if we didn't want to penalise the parking activity with that debt.
The intent at the time with the drawdown of using parking debt is that it has the user fee source of revenue to repay it over time. It would be a difficult proposition to get it to a surplus position of that much money to be able to actually fund.
I guess, can you send us the 46 million send us the full table with, sort of the year by year, blow by blow, what happens each year, so we can actually track what's going on with parking. Because part of the decision for me is that if we've got an activity which has incurred debt, which implies we've spent money on, normally in the past would be spend money on CapEx, I presume. So you sort of go, well, have a bit of a philosophy that's a little bit loose at the moment around the council table, but seems to be in the space of saying something like this, it should be a bit user pays focused. So then you sort of go, how much user pays do we need? When we look at this table, we kind of go, well, this sort of looks good on the operating surplus line, but when you factor in that debt, and I'm just trying to interpret what are we actually saying here, and where will this go to as we add that 46 million, and how much time do we have to do that? Because we've got competing interests here. One of them is we want more people in the CBD, city centre, sorry, and that way we will have more people paying money for parking, which will help to fund this. But on the other hand, we want higher charges so that when they do come into town, they will pay more money, and at some point they're going to cross over, and we have to make an educated guess, unless you give us better information about where that crossover point is, because we could be killing the city centre by implementing the wrong policies at the wrong times.
So, sorry, just to interpret that, so we'll get you a blow-by-blow financial spreadsheet on that debt and expenditure, and aim to bring back for workshop on setting of fees as well to help that.
So just a point of clarification, Paul, on that debt on the car parks. My understanding is that would have to come to council resolution to draw down that debt, or
The current resolution, to my knowledge, is to be able to take up to $46 million from that activity. But we can certainly bring that back, because I think, to Councillor Crowther's point, is that we need to make sure that the activity has sufficient funding to service that debt through that period.
Yeah.
So
no, that would be great if that could come back. Sorry, Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor. In terms of the information coming back to the workshop, I see Councillor Crowther's opened a window and I'll jump through the door. I would love, within those parking management plan areas, there's the Tauranga one, and then there's the proposed Mount Maunganui one, as part of that workshop to get an understanding about the level of investment within those parking management plan areas on things like parking facilities, streetscape upgrades, amenity projects such as Te Manawataki or Te Papa, other such things, because I would hate for us to get into a situation where the parking activity is in significant deficit, and hypothetically, in order to fund that deficit, we're having to charge people who are parking at the Mount in order to fund CBD projects. I think that would be a red rag to a bull and quite inappropriate. We get that information?
I just have a question around the paid parking, how we have got to the Arundel Street to Park Street, and then and then the P120 11th Ave to Marsh Street. Just keen to understand how we got to that.
Yep, so that one's going back a little bit now, so bear with me, but it was a lot of license plate recognition surveying of the area and the occupancy of those streets directly around the traditional city centre zone and the uses. So where that paid parking expansion, the purple area in the map that we're referencing on page 26, where the paid parking expansion was meant to happen, that place was already, and excuse the professional term, parked out. It was full all day, with people parking all day, either moving their cars while they're working, where maybe time limits already existed, or there were no time limits, it was full. The bit a little bit further out, sort of roughly down to 11th, where the P120s are, and that area directly around Memorial Park on the public streets, that had parking pressure during working hours, but not to the same degree as the paid parking area.
And so that is, under the current proposal, that's just P120, no option to pay beyond that P120, is that right?
So yeah, in those highlighted green bits, that's the P120s, that purple sort of fringe, your area down to Arundel, that's the paid parking area.
Rather,
Yeah, just on that map, I guess I was trying to get my head around why certain avenues or ends of avenues didn't have the green on, because there is, like, sort of empirically, when you sort of walk around there and have a look, it's very hard to see, you know, what's driving that. So you're saying it's because you know it's local vehicles who are parked, say, down the end of 6th Ave or something, but it's commuter vehicles that are parked in the other end of 4th Ave. Is that the kind of thinking you've applied to it?
So it was a huge focus on an occupancy survey at the time. That was a couple of years ago now. Like, bear in mind, this was meant to be rolled out late 22, and it's been postponed. So it won't be bang on and exact what we're dealing with. Part of my job, if something like this were to go forward, is to keep everybody aware, make those changes and adjustments as we need to as we go.
Because Edgecombe Road is the obvious sort of standout where you kind of go, why is that not green?
Taylor.
Thanks, guys. Good report, and we've obviously seen it a couple of times now, so getting to know it pretty intimately. Just a quick question on the recommendation there. You've got an alternatively F and G. So is that replacing E, or?
So essentially, yeah, that was the idea. That was based off some earlier discussions. Maybe there's an eventuality where you decide to look at the whole piece, the entire city, and look at all the parking management plans at exactly the same time. That could potentially happen, and that's where those sit there.
What we wanted to do there as well was to look at parts of the mount as well, where we have issues with the cruise ship. So whichever way we go, we recommend that we're given the opportunity to look at that for the next cruise ship season. So that's why we have that included in E, but also alternatively in G, so that we can cover that area for both, because that's a very important part of us to be able to carry on with, and that's feedback we've had from the port and for safe management of it as well.
Sorry, so just clarifying, if the urban centres would include Mount Maunganui and the other areas of Tauranga.
Yeah, that would be the whole lot. If you don't mind me sort of tacking on to the end there, and part of the reason for that Salisbury Wharf is we are sort of dealing with a live environment. Customers are turning up every day. We've done over 2,500 transactions a day. So there is stuff where people sort of have been angling for changes for a while that we've got our eyes on we can do to help.
That would then mean a delay in the implementation of what we're suggesting under A through to E. So that you have a delay of the expansion that we're proposing. So there's a sort of a disadvantage in the, I guess, the revenue component of that, but also the functionality of it.
Could we do E, do F and forget about G? So F being everywhere except for the city centre and Mount Maunganui?
So that would be a hold off on the city centre, pretty much proceed with everything else and look at everything else sort of deal.
I just have a question. So I know there's some talk about residential parking, residence permits, etc. So my understanding with those is you can only get back basically the admin cost of administering that. So look, the fundamental problem I have is, there is an expectation, but I don't think it's correct that we should be providing parking to every resident in the city. And I think, we need to send a message to the developers that actually you've got to provide car parks, because we're not delivering you free car parks, across the city. So is there a case where, rather than do resident parking, we charge X amount a year for a permit that allows you to park over the time limits in certain areas? Is that a way around the resident parking situation?
You'd have to be very careful with the wording involved in that. I have asked around about possibilities of doing something like that. And I don't think we would be able to do it. NZTA they've got restrictions over how those permits work. And if we had sort of tried to go around it by not making it specifically a residence permit system, we wouldn't be able to separate them, no.
But you could potentially, could you get to a point where you've got, let's say you buy, or you can park for $2,000 a year, and that allows you to park kind of anywhere. Is that something that would be possible?
When it comes to what would be monthly or yearly permits on the side of the road, not at this stage. It's something that we're talking to the New Zealand Parking Association and NZTA about having a look. That piece of legislation has been on the list for a while, but they're not looking at it at this stage, unfortunately.
Sorry, just to add to that, there is, we haven't included in the recommendations, but there is the potential that if you did want us to consider a resident permit or something such, trying to do that, we could work out a separate paper on that. And as an example being, do you agree to resident permits, but only for the current residents, so that if a property gets developed, those new residents don't get the option to a permit.
Yes, so there are options like a sinking lid, where you go, if you moved into this area before paid parking was a thing, you can get access to a residence permit. If you moved after a certain date when paid parking was there, then no, you don't qualify for a permit because you knew what the parking rules were at the time. So there's a lot that we can do in that space and how those permits function to make it a bit more workable, so we don't end up having to issue 10,000 a year as the number grows over time.
Yeah, no, I think that's really useful. I think we want to send a message that parking actually has a value, and when people, it's frustrating, I guess, when we get feedback. Oh, well, I bought a house with no parking and I can't find a park on the street. Well, that's kind of a buyer beware thing for me. Whereas, you want to actually encourage people to build car parks, even though they don't have to under the current legislation. So, Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Yeah, on that national policy statement, urban development, those parking, the ability to consider parking as part of a development, Gomberger, that opposes to full big subdivision consents, doesn't it?
I understand it applies to everything.
Councillor Crowther.
Clarify the sequence in terms of, when the public kind of hear about this kind of, whatever we decide today, they might well be thinking, how much is it going to cost if we approve parking fees in that other area? And then there's the issue of standardizing the pricing, which is something I know I've raised sort of in our briefing or informally or whatever, to try and sort of, at the moment in the area that is charged, to just make everything $2 an hour and just to alter the caps. I think that'd make it a lot simpler for the public. It's almost there anyway. And to me, it would just be, it'd be a a much simpler way for people to get their heads around what they won't get a nasty surprise, you know, of having to pay $5 for an extra 2 hours when they're thinking it's only $4 or something. So all of that is not within the scope of what we're deciding today. But when is that? Is that part of the annual plan consideration with fees and charges? Or is that, like, do you come back with another paper saying, if we propose to expand it today, here's the proposal for what the cost, what the charge would be?
Yeah, so we'll approach it more like the latter of that, of if you say yes, we'll ideally do a workshop, which I imagine will be public, around the principles, because I do very much believe that talking about principles of what you want parking areas to function like will be able to get through what that rating should look like, and then we can work out how we take those principles or those rates back to the community for some level of feedback prior to formal adoption, be it an annual plan or separately.
Is there an option? I'm just thinking of this P120, and obviously that will affect residents. Is there an option that it's P120, but you can pay just to stay there all day? And I'm just thinking that does, the resident permit doesn't seem like a great option to me potentially, but that gives people a choice that they can park on the road, but they just have to pay for it.
Easy. Yeah, we could do that.
The other question, is it correct that we have already got these machines if we need them? Are they sitting somewhere?
I don't like somebody knocking on me for my secret stash of machines, but yes, we already have them.
And the follow-up question to that, do we have an indication, because I haven't used a parking machine for years, because I just do it through the app, but what percentage of revenue we're getting through the app versus the machines?
Give me 2 seconds and I'll tell you.
While that's happening, I will just clarify for the machines for the current proposed paid area, not for the P120 and potentially pay all day. That would be an additional.
That would be additional. Okay, thank you.
For the last 2 months, it's 34.15% of our revenue comes through the app, which is pretty good.
I thought it would be higher, but that's interesting. People still use the machines. Councillor Crowther.
Do you have any analysis of what the impact would be if it was P180 or P240 rather than 120? And I guess what's driving the question is that there are some people who work half-time hours, and consequently they may well expect to be getting paid, or we may expect them to be getting paid less, for which the price of parking would be an issue. So I'm looking at where the sweet spot is in terms of trying to solve the problem in those early avenues and so forth, where I think there is a genuine issue. But would that support some potentially lower paid people to maybe park there for their half a day? Is there any analysis of that? Is there any way of knowing what the impacts would be?
So we don't have any specific analysis on those streets, but if you don't mind, I'll talk a little bit from experience, because I've been working in the space for a few years now. What we tend to see when you make the time limit P180 or P240 is it now becomes workable for office workers to move their cars. So you see a huge increase in occupancy because it's a lot easier for a lot of people with busy day jobs to walk down once at lunch, move their car, come back. So you don't always get the impact that you want.
Is there an easy way to solve that? For example, if you're in a zone that you have a limit, for example, or
So solving the people moving their vehicles
Yeah.
specifically. Yeah, so we've got a fair bit and we're working a lot more in that direction now that we use electronic license plate recognition as opposed to chalking car tires. But we've just got to keep in mind that there's a lot of sort of grey area around whether somebody has moved their car or whether they've left for a meeting and come back. Do we accept that? Or, you know, there's a lot that people are willing to say. And when you make that time limit a bit longer, there's a lot more leeway for people to sort of skirt through the system, if that makes sense.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Sorry, if I'd just add to that, a potential option there is around, once again, principles of parking. If you wanted to prioritise those people in the paid parking spaces for 4 to 5 hours, you could then ramp up the cost of parking from that 5 to 8 hours at a higher rate than previous. So once again, talking about principles of setting fees.
Right, is that all the questions? And sorry, just on that, we've spoken about the P120, potentially with a paid option. You'd need to know that now. Is that, like, if you're going to implement that, it's not something you could implement later, or?
If you wanted to approve it as is, and then we come back at a later point to rethink and see how some of it's going, we can always do that, or you could approve it now. So real non-answer, sorry.
But is it, I guess, once we've got P120, is it easy just to add in that option without too much? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the only item that I would add is, if you did believe that to be a serious concern, then the parking machines don't appear overnight. So there is a couple of month lead time in getting the machines here. So you might be left with that.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I think you've answered all our questions, so appreciate that. I guess, yeah, probably just be good to get a little bit of discussion around the table as to direction we're headed, so people can air any views they may have before we put a resolution on the table. Has anyone got any views?
Well, can I just add on that last point about the paid option on the 120? We could just add that to resolution or the recommendation D, because then it wouldn't have to come back to council. But actually, then if we leave it as an option, you can debate that at the workshop and give us a direction of how you want to implement it. And you may decide, once you know all the X and Y's of that equation, not to go down that path.
Be useful, I think, if we had an option there. Okay, I'll give you some of my views. I think I support this. I've heard that we've got some issues around parking, that we, there is a problem to solve, and I think it's a sort of a hard one, because I see what the P120 is. I think it's a good idea, because you do want to turn over car parks. What we've heard a lot around that 7th, 8th Ave, etc., is a lot of the businesses are struggling because they're not turning over those car parks, but there is residents there that need some of these car parks, and I guess the issue is while I don't see it as our place to be providing car parking, as a council, we should give people an option, that if they do want to park, they're happy to pay, then they can just park on the street, but it's a choice they're making, as to that sort of expedites that P120. If they're prepared to pay, they can pay for more. I'd prefer to see that probably than a residents parking, but obviously happy to look at the residents parking option. And I think, you know, again, the Mount Maunganui, it's looking at a management plan. You know, I think it's worth consulting there and looking at the options. That's not saying that there's going to be paid parking at the Mount. It's just, let's have a look at the situation and should we do something. I'm actually very encouraging of looking at the citywide, but what we've sort of heard today is there is an issue right now in the CBD and the fringe areas around that. So that's what we should solve. There is an issue at the Mount, so let's have a look at our options there, and then you know, we could later on go to looking at other problem areas across the city. As I said, I'm always only want to do stuff when we've actually got a problem to solve, and I'm satisfied that we do have some problems that we need to solve, and that's why we're being asked to make some of these decisions. So that's kind of my overall. I would go in supporting doing some of this stuff, but obviously hearing other views around the table before we put a motion up would be good. So Morris.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a difficult one, and insofar as resolution E, which may be moved, or F, which is somewhat related but wider, I think it's really important that we do consider that question that you have posed. What are we trying to solve? And is the problem around parking management or council revenue? And I think that those two things need to be kept separate. I think that we need to focus on the parking management aspect. Equally, I would say that insofar as the Mount goes, at the workshop and in the future, we should raise with the community the concept of time restrictions in order to get those parks turned over for retailers in the Mount CBD. However, I would say to people who would very eloquently and very strongly raise a case for so-called parking equity around our city, vis-a-vis the Tauranga CBD and the Mount CBD, that decision would need to be made within the full context of ratepayer investments within those sectors. And so I look forward to that information coming to the workshop, because I'll definitely be asking for it there so that we can, in clear and sober judgment, make a decision around what parking equity looks like. For me, parking equity does not look like paid parking in Mount Maunganui, because I think you have a solution there, which is time limiting, potentially. And let's not confuse a revenue problem with a parking problem, because they are very distinct. Also, I would say if we were looking to take a citywide approach, there is a situation where, again, and it circles back to the conversation we're having right at the beginning of the day, national government, or I should say central government direction, but it actually was national government direction, around the National Policy Statement for Urban Development and the squeezing of on-site car parks out of our community as a result of central government direction, and that has caused on-street parking problems for our community and our council to deal with. So that's another gift that we've been given from down in Wellington. I'll leave it there because I don't want to belabor the point.
That's some really good points, and you know, that is part of a management plan, is looking at all the different solutions to that plan. And I think that's just the message we need to be very clear with the Mount, is this is a parking management plan, not a guaranteed you know, cost or revenue generating exercise, and we'll look at all the options available to us. Yep, councillor Crowther.
Yeah, largely what he said. No, I can never rival that. I think for me, the amount of the charge will be vitally important in terms of getting community buy-in if we expand paid parking. And I think that sort of goes to the point that Councillor Morris made in terms of looking at the big picture, what revenue we need to service the parking activity, what the debt levels will be for the projects that it's may or may not have to support, and just the CapEx programs in those various areas anyway. And I think getting clear on that will help us to really understand where the money's being spent and where the revenue needs to come. I still have a bit of an allergic reaction when I see on page 28 mention my local Brookfield centre with its pharmacy and its dairy and its bread shop and its takeaways. And I'm thinking, if we're going to even remotely talk about managing parking there, I hope it'll be to provide more parking and better quality access for people in all modes of transport, not thinking of time limiting or charging, because to me that shouldn't be in the paper. But other than that, it was an exceptionally good paper. But I'll say that, you know, if I know where I know where Councillor Morris is in terms of Pafamara, but that should be about 100 years before we start thinking about doing Brookfield. But seriously, it is about what is in those centres, and to me, the idea is where you have that sort of combination of factors, where you have a sort of a destination there, whether it be for work or whether it be for other investments, basically, that we've put into the city. And that should lift up the threshold for where you can look at charging or time limiting people. I do think putting time restrictions in seems like the natural next step, as opposed to just going and asking for a whole lot of money from people who park there. I do think one thing that needs to be heavily stressed, and that did come out in was it strategy? I can't remember which, in the parking strategy, was like mobility parking and the needs, whether we're providing wide enough mobility parks in some areas. I think council has stepped up in that regard, and there is some really good provision of mobility parking. But I think that's something that I see as a really high priority. And on that note, I know there are members of the community who are really missing their ability, especially older people or mobility impaired, who miss the access they used to have to park on the waterfront in the CBD and look out at the view and the people. And I still am of a mindset that wherever possible, we shouldn't be sort of anti-cars in terms of, in an environment like that there's a place there to put mobility parking, even though there are kids in a playground and there's some green space and all that's cool. I still think there are places we can look at to enhance mobility parking, because there are some people in our community who parking is not just a matter of, parking up and running off and doing a whole lot of things. It's actually, that is their destination, to be in a car park and to look out at Mount Beach or to look out at the view from the waterfront. And so I actually don't have that black and white, cars are bad on the waterfront. I say mobility parking on the waterfront actually is a really seriously important community amenity. I'm a bit sad we have currently lost it, but I still think the scope to maybe look at that. But in terms of today, I would say, supporting this, I think it's been a good piece of work. I think the next step will be critical in terms of signalling the right things for the Mount, and in terms of setting the right fee for that next layer of parking in the near city centre.
Right. Then I'm happy to move what is there. I would just as we discussed, if we could just have well, at this stage, I'm happy to move E, and Councillor Taylor will. Yeah, I guess, yeah, my sort of steer is let's just take it one at a time, but that would be, yeah. Well, yeah, my personal view, if there's a seconder that's happy to support just like. Okay. You want to do everything or? Yeah, well, that's already in E.
If's okay.
G goes.
Other way around, sorry.
Okay, well, I'll let councillor Taylor then move. And councillor Roseboom will second.
So just quickly on this, again, a great report, a lot of work gone into this. I think it covers most things that we need to be looking at. I like the idea that we are going to consult at the Mount now because we've got the format for that. I think they made a start earlier and it was abandoned, but I think going back to that soon would be good. And then looking citywide, I think that's another thing that we need to do, but it's probably not quite as urgent as what the Mount looks like. So I think this covers us. It includes the cruise ship management plan, which is something that people are asking for. So I think, yeah, got it pretty well covered. Bit of work to do still, but it's a good start.
Yeah, councillor Baker.
Sorry, jumping the gun and breaking protocol. We're looking at approving 75 grand with the inclusion of F. I don't know if we have the putia to do that at this stage, or do we?
Yeah, I can maybe comment on that. To us, it's from an implementation perspective, it's probably either or. So we wouldn't have the resource to put into that citywide implementation plan or engagement plan if we focus at the expansion of the city centre. We focus on the Mount, and then when problems arise, we expand it. And that was always the intention of the original plan for the implementation, that we would start at the CBD, then go to the Mount, then go to Greerton and other problem areas as they, Brookfield particularly, yes, as they arise, Papamoa. So yeah, if I'd rather not see F as part of the recommendation for that reason.
Well, councillor Taylor.
Happy to do that.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could change it to 26-27 financial year. Is that?
Yeah, or
Well,
that would work very well. Thank you.
well, yeah, maybe a plan after the you know, after, well, it's the urban, yeah, following the Mount. So we're doing it in order. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that directors, staff are happy. Nick, you're happy that we'll take that after you've, as time permits. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's a good compromise, I think. Councillor Roseboom, have you?
Just in response to a few comments that have been made, I'm assuming that if we put a time limit anywhere, whether it's 120 or 180, I'm assuming there'll be a monetary fine to be sustained after that point. So, and that will be discussed at a later date. Definitely keen to get a wider Tauranga-wide parking policy. There's been lots of feedback around Greerton, especially when there's an event taking place in the Greerton Hall, that all the car parking for the shops is taken up by the users of the hall, and the shops cannot get a turnover of car park, so they lose customers for the day. Also, different activities require different parking requirements. Anyone who runs a retail shop next to a restaurant will realise that a lot of your parks are filled up with restaurant goers. Therefore, you don't have your customers to your retail shop don't have a turnover of parking available at your business address. These are all things that we need to work through, and a slow, steady approach, I think, is the best way for us to go. But it all needs to be covered, and all businesses need to have the opportunity to have a say on what works best for them. But we need to do more to help out our retail staff or our retail shops so they get a turnover of customers.
So Morris.
There is an elephant in the room which we haven't mentioned through this, and I think it's a significant one, particularly when you're looking at suburbs of Bayfair, Arataki, Papamoa and Tauriko, and that is that we don't control enormous amounts of parking in those areas because they belong to malls. And when we get to F, we'll have some interesting conversations around that, because council may have the ability to penalise the poor fish and chip shop, but not a large retailer and their customers. So we need to be careful around that. And excuse me, also cognizant of the fact that we don't control parking within those environments. So we need to look at how we interface with the city plan, the National Policy Statement for Urban Development, what that looks like, whether there is some scope there. It's not really, well, there is urban areas and there is potentially in commercial areas, but certainly not residential.
Councillor Correct.
Councillor Morris brings up a good point around the competition between the shopping areas and the private malls. And when you think about both Greerton, Brookfield, if council imposes limits which potentially could impose fines, or there's parking charges by meters, it just will move, potentially divert support for those shopping strips to then move on to the malls. Like Brookfield, they could decide to go to Bethlehem Town Centre, or Greerton, they could go to the lakes, and that's the last thing we want to happen, because we need to try and somehow just maintain the level of business occurring in those street situations, because they've been there a long time and they provide an excellent service. So, and some of them, like Greerton, I think are dropping off a little bit because of the new Lossy Centre down the road. So I wouldn't like to see too much happen there in terms of creating more diversion.
I think just my 2 cents, I think a lot of good discussion around the table. Obviously, this is about solving problems, and there's various ways through time limits, through paid parking, that we can solve that. Just want to get the point across. Parking costs us as a council to provide parking. It's not a free activity. If it's on a street, we've got to build a wider street. If it's parking buildings, they're obviously on prime residential, prime real estate. So it's not a free activity, and we need to encourage businesses. We need to look after our residents, but we're not in the job of ratepayers providing car parking for other ratepayers. So we need to find that balance and management solutions to be able to help people use parking as a scarce resource and not use it for all day. So it is a tricky problem, and we've heard about the malls and people's perception around free parking as such, but we also want to encourage, and I think a good parking management plan actually does help a number of businesses. We talked about the fish and chip shop. Well, a P60 or a P120 is actually aiding those businesses, because most people aren't at the fish and chip shop for over 60 minutes, and there's more of a chance that there is a park outside that shop if you do have those parking management plans in place. So it is a plan, and there is different solutions, and I'm looking forward to hopefully taking some of our people with us as we discuss this, and we try to explain to them what is the problem we're trying to solve. These are the options for solving it, and what do you support, and ultimately I think part of that is that this isn't a free activity for council. I don't believe our core business is providing parking for people, and there is a big cost in us providing parking. So there is some good reasons that we do need to look at this. But Councillor Taylor, would you like to wrap up or finish off?
I'm pretty happy with what I've already said. Just might make one comment. Councillor Crowther didn't mention public transport and how that's promoted by parking charges in the CBD. So missed an opportunity there.
Now I'll put a resolution as up on the board and ask all those in favour. Aye. Those against? That is carried. Thank you very much. Now we'll go to 11.8, shareholder feedback on council controlled organisations, draft statements of intent. I will take the report as read, and we have Sam and Gareth to answer any questions. And sorry, I'll just find that page. Page 36. Page 36 on the supplementary agenda is where we find that report. Have we got any questions for Sam or Gareth on this? No questions? Well, you've clearly done a good job then, and you've managed to take the feedback that we've given. So if we could just get that recommendation put up. So I am happy to move the recommended recommendations. We got a seconder. Councillor Roseboom, thank you. My only comments on this is we've obviously seen the draft statement of intents from each of these, and I would say overall the CCOs have done a good job on I guess taking our feedback and feeding that back into their statement of intents, which is great. The main points, I guess, was having some measurables and benchmarking against other councils and organisations similar to the CCOs. So that was really the main feedback I think that we had, and we look forward to receiving those finalised statements of intent after they take the feedback that we're feeding back to them. Councillor Roseboom, have you got anything to add?
No, I'd just like to reaffirm the Mayor's comments around all the CCOs definitely taken on board our desire to become more efficient. value for money and some cost savings. All reports are well written. Thank you very much. And on a future, we've kind of made a decision to get to know you all better, and we look forward to doing that.
Any other discussion around the table? If there's no further discussion, therefore I'll put the motion to the council. Ask all those in favour. Those against? That is carried. Thank you very much. 11.9, we are going to leave. Obviously, with the decision we made earlier today, that the City Delivery Committee will look at, will now monitor the CCOs. We can use that. That report can go to the City Delivery Committee. 11.10, we are actually also going to leave. And the reason being is we're going to have a look at a wider context rather than just one asset as to how we believe whether we should be owning as council some of our assets and leasing them, or whether they should be with the CCOs. And so we will go into a wider context to look at that.
Point of clarification, Mayor, will that be a workshop or something coming to the council table right then and there?
It'll be something that will come back to council. And yeah, there's probably a bit more work to be done around looking at that, and it's probably quite a substantial piece of work looking at the benefits, etc. So yeah, we'll look at it in a wider context. Yeah. I think that report will go away. Yeah, because it'll come back as a different report. Yes.
Clarify from BVL's perspective, the operational grant issue, presumably like there are different ways forward. One of the ways is we end up saying, yes, they can have the requested amount. Another way is to say, no, you can't. But either way, what I'm understanding is we want to have QE2 and the new facility both going. Hypothetically, if it was to say, no, we don't want to give you the grant, but we also said we don't want you to add more to the debt, I mean, are they going to have time to respond to that? Because I know we've canvassed various options sort of informally. When it comes to a formal kind of council meeting, that we've got a lot of things on our schedule. I'm just looking, are we backing Bay Venues into a corner here?
Yeah, sorry, that was I should have clarified that point. So that 156,000 that is looking as an operational grant. So that will come back through the annual plan deliberation process, and that will be an appropriate place to consider that. So that will be considered, but yeah, we don't need to consider that now. So that moves us forward to 11.11, appointments to the board, Bay Venues Limited, the Tauranga Art Gallery Trust, and Tourism Bay of Plenty. Again, I'm happy to take this report as read. This is obviously a report that has been left to lie on the table. So there is a whole lot more information. Let me just. Oh, it's in. Sorry, it is. It's a separate late report. Page 4. It's the April late agenda, I believe. Oh no, that's. Oh, it is. Yeah. So, yeah. So there is a few confidential attachments to this report. Obviously, if we want to deal with those, we can go into publicly excluded, but I'll again hopefully take that as read, and there won't be too many points that we need to refer to those. But yes, if there's any questions for staff, or do we want to look to have, I think again we should probably have a discussion around this. I know we had quite a robust discussion last time, and differing of opinions, and that's why it's been left on the table. So any questions for staff? Yeah.
A point of clarity for staff, and apologies if I missed it in the brief. So we've got staff or GMs currently on one board that I know of, and perhaps two. Should an elected member be appointed, do those staff members drop off by default, or because they're appointed as independents, they stay there as well as an elected member?
Well, I think that'd be a decision for council, but our recommendation would be that you'd probably want to have one representative of council on a CCO. If you have a councillor there, it's probably a role for an elected member, as opposed to a staff member.
No. So there's yeah, so I think there's in the Bay Venues one, I think that's one of the resolutions that talks about replacement of replacement. So I guess a month or so on, any general discussion? Have we got a preferred method, or some changing of opinions? Councillor Kura.
Aside from my personal opinion, I've been opposed to elected members on the boards. I think it's probably a little bit premature still to make the decision. From what I recall about the level of discussion that we've had informally, etc., and previously, and it would be beneficial if we deferred some decisions around that for like another 6 months, to give us an opportunity to get a good feel about how these CCOs are operating. It seems quite early in our piece as a newly elected council to go down this track. I think we should just give it a little bit more time. I'd be happy to make some of those other decisions regarding the appointments that need reappointing. But the elected member issue, I'd just like to probably defer for another 6 months.
Okay, do people support that? Do people want to make a decision today? Let's have a, Councillor Taylor.
I'd support the comments made by Councillor Kurak. I could definitely see some good benefits in having EMs on some of the boards. But I'd probably just like to understand how they're currently operating, and potentially some more of there's got to be some fishhooks in this that we need to understand better perhaps. So definitely supportive of, there's a couple of items there about appointing people, which I think we should do. Yeah. But I'd be happy if we deferred this to look at it more and come back in 6 months' time.
Is that a shared view around the table?
Is that specifically around C?
I think there's a number of those. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Baker.
Yeah, I'm generally supportive of that too. I mean, with the letter of intents, it'll be good to see how those roll out. My position, as per my reasoning last time, really hasn't changed much yet, but have an open mind to it. I guess the question then, should we defer? Does that impact on those vacancies that will inevitably happen as of June, I read somewhere, for most of them? Just a question on that behalf, and if this disrupts the the process and ability and capability of these boards?
Yeah, I suspect that most, if we made a decision in 6 months, most would probably be able to take additional members. And Gareth, is that like, are the boards set with numbers, or is there generally an ability to add people? Or
Yeah, the boards don't necessarily have set numbers, but they have very set budgets and set rates that they pay their chairs, deputies, and board members. Elected members would join non gratis, so that wouldn't be an issue. But adding other members of the board randomly definitely creates financial issues for the board. A decision to delay by 6 months is no issue whatsoever. We would just, however, need to check with each individual board in terms of the current appointees and if they would be happy to extend their term for 6 months, for example, because we can't leave the boards in a situation where they wouldn't have a quorum and therefore wouldn't actually be able to, operate effectively. So that's something that we just need to check.
okay, I think rather than do that, let's work through each individual one as we go here, and we can sort of probably get some decisions. Maybe if we could just have those recommendations up. So one is obviously A is fine. Again, B, I think that is we're kind of on board that was already happening. We can remove C. I think in light of that one, because potentially that would be a replacement of Gareth. So the two directors that are finishing, we probably need to find replacements for that.
The two options: one, you could talk to both of those directors, or we could talk to both those directors and see if they'd be prepared to extend their term for a short to medium period of time to allow yourselves enough time, along the lines of what Councillor Currick mentioned, or you could go to market to recruit into those two positions, which is what was originally intended. You could go to the market for a shorter period of time. So the normal period would be 3 years. But for example, we could go out and say we were looking for someone to fill a position for a year or something like that. Anything less than that, I think, would be, unrealistic.
Yeah, I just see there's no, whether we appoint elected members or not, there's no difference, because those two still need to be replaced, and elected members not taking one of those positions under the current resolution.
Right.
So I think we just go to market and appoint those as per normal. So
that's E.
So we can probably, we can leave D because that's, and then notes recruitment of expected vacancies will commence as per council's appointment. Yep. So E just says we're replacing those two in D.
Yep.
I think. Yep. Okay, so that one's sorted.
Excuse me, Mayor. So on C, will we not approve the reappointment of current Tauranga City Council employee?
Well, I don't think he needs to be. You don't need to be reappointed. No.
Term's not due to expire yet. So
so we don't put you under pressure just yet.
Yeah, not yet, mate.
Again, we've got a current director for the Tauranga Art Gallery Trust. I think we should reappoint that position, and obviously, if elected members, then they could be an addition if we decided to go that way. No, so we need to say does not approve. We approve it approves the reappointment. No, I think she was available for reappointment. Is that right?
No, Siska wasn't available for reappointment, so we'd have to go out to the market.
Oh, okay.
We could have
Can we just confirm that? Because my understanding was that she was available. It's just. Because see, we do not approve the reappointment.
Apologies, I've had a discussion with the chair of the Art Gallery Trust last week, and she is no longer available for that reappointment, but they'll be able to manage the gap of her not being on the board in the meantime. So I guess similar to E above could be provided for the Tauranga Art Gallery Trust as well.
Do they need an additional trustee or?
Well, they do eventually, but they don't need one as at 30 April. So it can align with the 1st of July date for all the other ones which we're looking to realign. So they can carry that vacancy till the 1st of July, I suppose.
Okay. Could they carry it for 6 months? That's what.
I haven't got to that level with them yet.
Based on the skills matrix that's included in the supplementary, I'd suggest that they'd prefer to fill the position, sooner rather than later.
All right.
But the copying of E down to G would allow us to undertake that.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Crowther.
Just seeing it came up, I guess I just wanted to clarify whether you used the words that she's no longer, seeking to be like, I'm wanting to see if there's any implications for the slightly clumsy way that, without any ill intent, I think as elected members we're being a little bit clumsy on this particular thing. Did that play a part in her decision, or was that nothing to do with it?
No, she already had an overseas trip planned for that time, and so if anything, that was probably on our part, the fact that we were trying to funnel information so quickly into that report that came up, that we probably got our wires a bit crossed on who was and wasn't available to be reappointed.
That's good. I think, no ill intent from anyone. I think it's good that it's ended up happily.
So then Tourism Bay of Plenty. So H is fine. And take out I. Take out. So again, do we have any direction as to Jason and Claire, were they looking to be reappointed, or they're leaving?
Pretty sure they're end of tenure, so they've served their 2 terms.
Okay, so that one we need to
copy E as well.
Yeah, recruit. That one would obviously have to work with Western Bay. Oh, we just need to change, just be careful that's got Bay Venues Limited. And probably the same, there's probably the same issue we had with the art gallery as well. Okay, sorry, can we just go up a little bit? The delegates. Yeah, so we want J to go to June, give us time for recruitment, I think. Notes that the position does not with the appointment. I think we can take out K. Because I think that was if we had an elected member. No, because we haven't agreed to that.
Okay.
Notes that the position of deputy chair does not transition. Oh, yeah, that's fine. Actually, we can do that. So that's fine. Is that normal? We would appoint or we would approve the deputy chair?
No,
or-
just the chair.
Okay, so that's something done.
It can stay in there, but it's kind of a bit of a red herring, really.
Okay. And then let's just have notes. So I think we can take out the notes. So we can take out all that because all that bottom, that next bit.
Yeah, everything
L and
under
M.
decisions inconsistent with council policy, that can all come out. And you've already transferred to the open, I think.
Yeah, we're in open still, so. All right. Do we need to put in something that we will, do we want a resolution or we just want to, no, we'll just bring it back when we're ready. Okay. I think we've got there. So have I got a mover and seconder of that resolution? Councillor Morris, thank you. Councillor Schuler, thank you. Any discussion? All right, therefore I'll put that motion to the council. Ask all those in favour. Those against? That is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, I think 11.12 is now defunct, I think.
Do we just need to receive 11.12?
Okay, so 11.12, we'll just receive that report. Councillor Kurax moved that. Councillor Taylor's second that. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favour? Those against? That is carried. Thank you very much. That ends the public part of the agenda. So I thank everyone very much for thank you very much for that. We will go back into publicly excluded. I ask for a mover and seconded. Councillor Roseboom, Councillor Taylor, thank you very much. All those in favour of going into publicly excluded.